Jordan sat on the edge of the couch, leg bouncing, eyes flicking towards the door every few seconds. It was his third session, and while he started to open up a bit more, his demeanor today was different, edgier, more unsure. He had just begun dating someone new. "I don't know what's going wrong with me," he said, trying to laugh it off. "Things are going great. I'm already convinced she's going to leave me. I'm checking my phone constantly. I keep reading her text, even though she hasn't done anything wrong." As the conversation deepens, Jordan revealed a childhood marked by inconsistent caregiving. His mother was loving but emotionally unpredictable, sometimes warm and attentive, other times cold and withdrawn, often depending on her stress levels. His father, physically present but emotionally absent. Now, as an adult, Jordan found himself stuck in a pattern, craving closeness, fearing abandonment, and sabotaging intimacy before it can even fully bloom. Hey, welcome to the Licensure Lifeline podcast. This is your host, Matt Lawson, and after a very long hiatus, I am back, and I am very sorry that it took me this long to get this episode out. Lots of things have been happening in my world, and I just needed to take a moment to take a breath. And unfortunately, the podcast had to be shelved for a little bit. But I'm glad to be back here, and I'm going to keep things going. Just as a reminder, follow us on Instagram. Head over to @Licensure Lifeline. I'm going to put information up there about the episodes, flashcards every once in a while, things like that. That's also the best way to get in touch with me. I did have some people reach out, and through the podcast, unfortunately, I'm not able to respond back to those messages. So use Instagram if you want to write me a question or anything like that. All right, let's get to the news. A recent 2024 study out of the University of Toronto explored whether AI-powered avatars could simulate secure attachment experiences in therapy. Early results show these tools may help clients with avoidant or anxious attachment styles build trust more quickly. This is really cool. Anytime that you can simulate something in a therapy session that can really help a person with their attachment, the way that they relate to other individuals, it can really be helpful. And again, I know there's so much talk about the way technology is going, the way AI is going. I think there's a lot of doom and gloom in our field around where technology is taking people. I've already seen a lot of chatbots and things like that that emulate therapy sessions. And to be fair, people are using chatbots as therapists currently. And I'm not saying that there's not going to be a day where therapist and therapy is going to be challenged significantly by AI, but I really see the potential here for us to get ahead of the tech and learn how to use it in concert with the work that we're already doing. I see just the ability here to meld these different technologies and old school therapy in a way that can just really, really help people. So, seeing something like this study, seeing how, we can use AI to support people's attachment theory. Or attachment styles, attachment theory, is huge. It's something that you can simulate again in session and support the individual right then and there and talk about their experience and build upon the work that they're doing. I just see a lot of potential there for helping people. For our study stack today, I want you to imagine turning passive reading into purposeful recall. So one way to do this is to imagine that you're teaching the material to one of your clients. So let's take Jordan as an example here. Jordan from the vignette that I went over. So let's say you're going to teach him about attachment theory. It might start off with you just being like, "Jordan, I want to introduce you to this idea of attachment theory. It's a way of really understanding how our early relationships with caregivers shape the way we relate to others as adults. So you see, you're already kind of like explaining things, and you're kind of going it over in your head, right? Like you're reviewing this information in your head. And again, like as many of you know, I started this podcast as a way to learn, well, review the material that for the NCE. And I just feel like teaching is one of the best ways to really embed this stuff um, and get this information out. So, just think about and imagine that client in front of you and what you would say to them and how you would go over this information. Like, it doesn't necessarily have to be out loud. It might actually help to record yourself saying this to somebody and then listen to those recordings again while you're working out or while you're commuting or whatever. But anytime that you can just go over the information in a way that is explaining is just going to help your recall that much more. I recently got a note from somebody that was asking, there's so many theorists. How do I remember all these theorists? So, first off, what I just described is a great way to help you remember a lot of different material for these tests. You don't need to have perfect recall of every single theorist that is mentioned throughout the psychological world, that's mentioned throughout the classes. You're going to see there's kind of like there's primary, secondary, and tertiary individuals that are scattered throughout the learning material. So, your primary guys like Freud and Rogers and Erickson, I mean, yeah, you need to know their main concepts and break it down. Like, what are the main concepts of those individuals, and use some scaffolding, use some different strategies and techniques that I've talked about to really help you get to know who these individuals are. The really neat thing, especially with the NCE, is the way that they ask a lot of the questions. If you know, let's say, Rogers really, really well, Freud really, really well, then you can actually do some process of elimination to get the answers correct. So you'll look at a question and it'll give you multiple choices, and you can look at them and say like, oh, that's definitely something that Rogers does, or oh, that's definitely something Freud does. So I know if the answer is Erickson, and you can do process of elimination and be like, that this gets you now down to just two answers that could be that are correct for this question. So you have a 50-50 chance of now getting this question right. So it's not always knowing everything about the individuals, but it can be helpful just knowing enough to do some process of elimination for each of the questions. But don't feel like you need to know everything about every single theorist. You can do really, really well by breaking them down by just who order of importance, really, and then focus on the top tier, and then just understand and have some good little notes about some secondary and tertiary type of theorist. All right, let's get into some of the core material. So, yeah, we're talking about attachment theory today, and the father of attachment theory, one a new theorist here, John Bowlby. He's a British psychoanalyst, developed attachment theory back in the 1950s. He believed early relationships form an internal working model. And this results in a secure base that kids are able to feel safe and explore from. And he saw attachment disruptions that could result in long-term effects on emotional development. So Bowlby's whole thing is, from the get-go, from a very young age, we're talking, one, sometimes even less than, kids pick up on a lot. And things like inconsistency, things like coldness. I'm adopted. My brother's also adopted. And, it's really interesting the different times and some of the different attachment styles that a lot of therapists have said that we developed before we were adopted. My brother was in the adoption agency longer than I was. And um, his attachment styles are just different because of that. And we were told this from when we were younger. And those things that we worked on, my parents worked on with us. from when we were younger. But even from that, the my adopted parents, their way of showing caregiving and things like that also impacted the way I am and the way my brother is. And we're both very different individuals. And part of it is because of what we saw when before we were adopted, which I was less than one, and we were both adopted before we were 1 years old. But just that amount of time, the months that we spent in agency, result did have an impact on us. Another name that you're going to see in the attachment theory world is Mary Ainsworth. Her thing was strange situation. Um, and what she did is she had an observational framework, observational research back in the 1970s, and introduced three main attachment styles. So this is the individual that developed secure, avoidant, and ambivalent or anxious attachment styles. And later, researchers added disorganized as an attachment style as well. This is fascinating work. It's really neat to see, you know, especially if you're in a relationship, the different attachment styles that you have compared to your significant other. And one of the neat things with this is being able to just help you understand the way your partner is attached to you, the way you're attached to your partner, and being able to consider that when rough times come up, when things come up that maybe challenge your beliefs around what this person should do or shouldn't do for you. So let's flesh out the ideas of the different attachment styles. So secure, caregiver consistently meets needs. Um, People tend to be more confident and emotionally balanced when their needs are met at young ages. With avoidant attachment style, the caregiver tended to be dismissive or unavailable. And with this attachment style, you see children that suppress a need for closeness, right? And that makes sense. If the caregiver was dismissive or unavailable, the the way that the child develops themselves to protect against that is to pretend like they don't need it. They don't need the closeness. They can suppress that, and if you don't show that you need it, then you can't be hurt by it, right? Next up, anxious or ambivalent. This is inconsistent caregiving, somebody that's hot and cold a lot of the times. You tend to see kids that are clingy and anxious, they're unsure and have a difficult time trusting others. Lastly, disorganized attachment style. The caregiver here is frightening or abusive, and this can result in erratic behavior or confusion. All right. Clinical application with attachment styles is just understanding how attachment influences the therapeutic alliance. So the really wild thing about attachment theory and just attachment in general is it gets generalized to how people relate to all the people in their lives, not just with their partners, but you can see this in the therapeutic alliance, the way that your client works with you and talks to you and trusts you or mistrust you, how long it takes them to really warm up and open up to you. Their attachment style matters, and it's something to really learn how to understand from the get-go, being able to see some of the things from the intake or the first couple of sessions where you can be like, oh, this person has a secure attachment style or an avoidant attachment style or anxious attachment style, can really help build that relationship with them, can really help you better support them. um, and it really is important for conceptualization, and this is often linked to the problems that they're coming to address, especially if they're coming to work on any type of relationship issues. All right, so that's going to be it for the main topics. Let's look at what some NCE questions might look like for attachment style. So question number one: which attachment style is most associated with inconsistent caregiver response? Is it A, secure attachment style, B, avoidant attachment style, C, anxious, or D, disorganized? The answer here is going to be anxious. C. This is due to the unpredictable caregiver availability. Question number 2. Bowlby's secure base concept refers to A, defense mechanism, B, a physical place of safety, C, a parent's ability to regulate emotions, or D, a caregiver who fosters confident exploration. The answer here, I mean, they're secure, right? So it's going to be D, a caregiver that fosters that confident exploration. Um, People that are secure are able to do this, that feel secure, able to do this. Question number 3. In the strange situation, a child who ignores their returning caregiver likely has A, secure attachment, B, avoidant attachment, C, anxious attachment, or D, disorganized attachment. Answer here is going to be B. Question number 4. An adult client who avoids intimacy and values independence above all is likely exhibiting A, anxious preoccupied attachment, B, secure attachment, C, avoidant attachment, or D, disorganized attachment. The answer here is going to be C. The question was a client who avoids intimacy. So, yeah, avoidant attachment is one of the hallmarks, right? Last question. The strange situation was designed by A, Bowlby, B, Erikson, C, Ainsworth, or D, Piaget. Answer here is going to be C. And again, like I was talking about before, how you're able to do some process of elimination. I mean, we're talking about attachment theory. So Erikson and Piaget, you know, those really aren't people known for attachment theory, but both Bowlby and Ainsworth are. So right there, you now have a 50-50 chance just knowing who are these people in the attachment theory world of getting the question right. Just being able to eliminate two people that you know are associated with some other concepts. All right, let's do a quick vignette. Um, you meet Ava. She's 30 years old, experiencing anxiety in romantic relationships. She reports feeling too much for others, needing constant reassurance and panicking when partners take time to respond to text messages. She describes her childhood as was marked by periods of warmth followed by emotional unavailability from her mother who struggled with depression. A question for this vignette might look like, what is the most likely attachment style that Ava demonstrates here? The answer would be anxious ambivalent. Um, which interventions might best support Ava's goals? Just think about this one for a second. The answer here is going to be psychoeducation on attachment, mindfulness, and emotional regulation skills. Psychoeducation comes up a lot as the answer to um, how we can support the people in these vignettes. You want, I mean, and it makes sense, right? You want them to understand what you're seeing and what you're noticing with them, and just giving them a little bit more in-depth knowledge to attachment and attachment styles and the why behind the way that they're behaving can be extremely powerful. Question 3. Which past experience best explains her attachment presentation? Of course, it's going to be the inconsistent caregiving from her mother, right, who was also experiencing some depression. Um, you don't like to always blame the mom, and you shouldn't always blame the mom, but it's really wild how a lot of these questions are geared toward blaming moms, which, whatever. Um, all right. So, attachment theory is something that you're going to see a lot of in practice, especially if you work with people on their relationships. And, it's going to oftentimes be a foundational piece that you are going to work from when you first meet someone that wants to improve relationships or comes to you complaining about problems that they're having with relationships. So, it's worth really understanding attachment and just for your own knowledge and understanding. People, the relationships that you have with everybody is really bound and framed by what they experienced for attachment in their world and the way you experienced attachment in your world. So definitely something to develop your knowledge around, and I hope this helped. Okay, and that is going to be it for the episode. Thank you so much for listening. And again, apologies for taking such a long time away. But until next time, keep studying.